Ancient horrors exist, but they aren't from another dimension. They're in your local neighborhood pond, and your best defense against them might be a $2 piece of plastic. When I was a zookeeper, I worked with some pretty dangerous Class 1 animals like venomous snakes, Komodo dragons, and alligators. And a lot of times, guests would come up and ask me what the scariest thing was at the zoo. Naturally, they would expect me to name one of the snakes, maybe the alligators. Rarely would they expect me to point over to the turtle pond and say, "It's in there." And they would laugh, usually, until they saw that I was serious. And I would ask them, "Have you ever heard of Naegleria fowleri?" Most people haven't, but they know it by its other name, the brain-eating amoeba. And as a biologist, I can tell you it's one of the scariest things I know about anywhere on Earth. You're about to learn how this single-celled entity unravels your mind before it kills you. Then you'll realize the scariest thing. Nature has no mercy. The monster exists, it is spreading, and we're going to try to find one.
That brings us here. This is a standard neighborhood retention pond. It is hot out here today, the water is stagnant, and it is a perfect biological incubator for thermophilic organisms. That just means heat-loving, which is exactly what Naegleria are, and that might become a huge problem for humans that we'll talk about a little bit later. I'm looking for a shallow spot where the sediment is settled to take my collection.
Most people see this as an eyesore, but for a biologist, this is a nursery for strange and ancient things. This isn't the only place you can find them, though. The issue is these ancient things, including the brain-eating amoeba we're hunting, also love ponds, lakes, and slow-moving rivers where us humans are most vulnerable. We're collecting water and a bit of the top layer of silt. Naegleria doesn't just float. It stalks the biofilm where the food is. This is where the trophozoites, the active feeding stage of the amoeba, are most likely to be hunting for bacteria. Now we'll head back to the microscope to see if we can find the predator before it finds a host. If it does find a host, it might look something like this. It starts as the perfect Florida afternoon. 100-degree heat, stagnant water, laughing friends, and a rope swing. You don't see the predator. You couldn't even if you tried. It doesn't have teeth or claws, and it's the size of a speck of dust. You hit the water, hard. A stream jets into your sinus. You might feel a sharp sting, sort of like a brain freeze from the lake. That pressure just deposited a colony of Naegleria fowleri directly onto the gateway of your mind. It's very rare for this to happen, but you're one of the unlucky few. If you're truly unlucky, you might be one of the people who literally invites them in with an untreated sinus rinse. Either way, once they're inside, the water isn't just a medium, it's a delivery system. Deep inside your nasal cavity, tucked away from the air you breathe, is a patch of specialized tissue called the olfactory neuroepithelium. This connects your brain to the environment and gives you your sense of smell. To the amoeba, it's a physical bridge, a highway that leads directly through the cribriform plate, a crucial strainer-like barrier between your brain and the outside world. The breach is complete. You're laughing, heading home, totally unaware that the countdown has begun. While you plan your evening, the ancient horror is already waking up. In Eldritch lore, the scariest entities are the shapeshifters, beings that morph to bypass our reality. Naegleria fowleri is a master of this. If conditions are dry or cold, it exists in a cyst stage, an armored seed-like state waiting for conditions to improve. Out in the lake, it was likely in its flagellated stage. It grew two whip-like tails to zip through the water, a mindless scout just searching for resources. But the moment it hits your nasal passage, the physics change. It doesn't need to swim anymore. It needs to climb. Within minutes, it undergoes a total biological metamorphosis. It sheds its tails and deploys pseudopodia, fleshy, reaching limbs. It is transformed from a drifter into a trophozoite. The swimmer is gone. The hunter has arrived. So in our hypothetical story, the doctors don't even know there's a problem yet. Out here, the hunt is much simpler. I've just returned from the retention pond with our sample. And in this syringe, there is just a few milliliters of Florida pond water. Now to most, this just looks like a disgusting bit of water in a syringe. And while that's technically true, for us, this is a haystack. And in it, we are looking for a very small, very lethal needle. All right, here I'm setting up a wet mount. We're gonna start at about 100 times magnification just to get our bearings, then we'll dive deeper. What we'll see at first is busyness, just harmless ciliates, rotifers, and algae. This is the microscopic world of your neighborhood pond. It's a vibrant, bustling ecosystem. But among these peaceful drifters, we're looking for a specific type of movement, slow and deliberate crawling. We're looking for the pseudopodia, those fleshy limbs we talked about earlier. Finding Naegleria fowleri in a wild sample is notoriously difficult. It's one of the reasons they're so dangerous. They aren't always the dominant species in the water, just one of the more opportunistic ones. We have to look past the flashy, fast-moving organisms and find the one that is built for the hunt. Let's see if our ancient horror is actually in this drop of water. It's been a few days. You're at work or maybe having dinner when the first symptoms arrive. A dull headache, a slight stiffness in your neck. You dismiss it as stress, or maybe you stayed in the sun too long at the lake. But inside, the trophozoite has reached your olfactory bulbs. These are the two small lobes at the base of your brain that translate smells like your favorite meal or a rainstorm into signals you can understand. They have crossed the bridge. They are no longer looking for a way in. They are looking for a way to feed. This is where the ancient horror stops being a metaphor and starts being a biological reality. The amoeba deploys its primary weapon, amoeba stomes. These are literal food cups, specialized structures designed to bite, tear, and suction away pieces of your cellular tissue. They don't just absorb nutrients, they actively graze on your neurons. They're stripping the insulation off of your nerves bit by bit. As your immune system realizes it's under attack, it sends a wave of white blood cells to the area. But in this case, your own defense is your downfall. The resulting inflammation, the swelling of your brain against the immovable walls of your skull, is what truly begins to unravel your reality. The impending insanity of the Eldritch lore is starting, and you still don't know you're in a fight that you've already lost. It's now been a week since that great day at the lake. The dull headache that you had has transformed into a localized, throbbing agony behind your forehead. You're nauseous, you're vomiting, but the most unsettling symptom is the one you can't quite describe. The world just smells wrong. Everything you encounter, your coffee, the air in your room, has a metallic, putrid, or burnt smell. This is cacosmia. It is the first strong signal that the precious barrier to your brain has been breached. The amoeba have degraded your olfactory bulbs and are now creeping into your frontal lobe. This is the unraveling. Your frontal lobe is the seat of who you are, your personality, your logic, your self-control. As the amoeba stomes continue their grazing, the ancient horror begins to delete what makes you, you. And here it is, a single cell crawling across the slide, extending its pseudopodia back and forth to explore the glass. But here's the scariest part of the entire hunt. Despite my training and what I know, I can't tell you for certain if this is the killer. In a raw sample, a harmless soil amoeba looks identical to the ancient horror we're hunting. Without a DNA test or a specialized culture, the difference between a curious observer and a death sentence is completely invisible. By now, the alarm bells aren't just ringing, they're screaming. You're hospitalized, but the enemy isn't something a doctor can just cut out. Your brain is under siege. Millions of neutrophils, the immune system's heavy infantry, flood the area in a frantic wave. This is primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. The label brain eater creates a specific image: microscopic zombies tearing at neurons until there's nothing left. But if you think like a biologist, a single-celled entity is a speck against the vastness of your frontal lobe. Even with those amoebostomes grazing away, a few specks shouldn't be able to end your life in a week or two. The brain eater label is a forensic distraction. The entity only consumes a tiny fraction of your tissue. The real killer is internal. When your immune system panics, it triggers a scorched earth policy. It floods your cranium with fluid and cytokines, molecular SOS signals that tell your blood vessels to pop their seals and let the defenders in. But in the enclosed vault of your skull, that influx of fluid turns into a hydraulic nightmare. The pressure simply has nowhere to go. Your body, in a desperate, blind attempt at salvation, becomes a hydraulic press. What happens when the hardware of your mind begins to fail under that pressure? You might expect silence, but the brain does the opposite. It overfires. The cacosmia is joined by a cacophony of phantom sounds. You hear the hum of the ICU lights as a rhythmic, guttural chanting. The shadows in the corner of your room don't just flicker, they coalesce into a geometric entity that seems more real than the doctors standing over you. This is the impending insanity of the Eldritch lore. But it isn't magic. It's the result of your brain swelling so severely that it's being forced downward through the base of your skull. You are witnessing the literal unspooling of your neural hardware. Your visual field begins to pixelate, and you realize, with a cold, distant terror, that the very concept of you is dissolving into a soup of misfiring electricity. I've spent the better part of an hour staring into this drop of water now, and we've seen the busyness of the pond. We've seen the ciliates darting around like minnows. We've seen bits of algae floating like a kelp forest in the ocean. We've even seen some amoeba, those slow-moving, crawling shapes. In this drop, we have several organisms that fit the profile of a Naegleria trophozoite. But the reality is, I can't tell you if I'm looking at a killer. Without a DNA sequencer, there is no way to tell the difference between a regular harmless soil amoeba and Naegleria fowleri. That's one of the things that makes them so terrifying. To a clinician, the ancient horror is defined by the encephalitis, the cacosmia, and the mechanical failure of your brain. But to a biologist, it's just a cell doing what it's done for millions of years. It isn't evil for grazing on neurons any more than it's evil for grazing on the bacteria in the silt. It's just an opportunist that found its way into the wrong environment. The scariest thing about hunting Naegleria fowleri isn't the finding, it's the not knowing. It's the realization that while we've built cities, created medicine, and mapped the stars, we still live alongside entities that can dismantle our entire identity in a week or two. And we can't even tell if they're in the pond down the street or in the drainage ditch in front of your house. I'm going to go bleach this slide now, not because I'm certain it's dangerous, but because as a biologist, I've learned to respect this ancient horror enough to not take that chance. Nature doesn't have a moral compass. It only has a hunger. And that hunger leads here. The ICU doors swing open to a 97% fatality rate. Very few people have ever contracted Naegleria fowleri and lived to walk away. But a narrow experimental path does exist, a treatment so counterintuitive that it borders on the impossible. As your sensory collapse reaches its peak, the final gamble begins. Doctors reach for amphotericin B and miltefosine. These aren't subtle medicines. They are chemical sledgehammers so toxic they shred cell membranes almost indiscriminately. You're now at the point where the cure is nearly as destructive as the monster itself. Intuition normally tells us that survivors are the strongest, the ones whose bodies fought the hardest. The truth here is the opposite. Survival comes from surrender. By using induced hypothermia, cooling your core to 33 degrees Celsius or around 91 degrees Fahrenheit, doctors freeze your immune system's panic. They aren't just slowing down the amoeba, they are slowing down the cytokine storm. They have to bring you to the very brink of death, slowing your metabolism and dulling your inflammatory response to stop your body from literally killing itself. In this state, you aren't really you anymore. You're a biological system on pause, caught in a stalemate between a microscopic predator and a sci-fi cure. This isn't a new threat, it's a dormant one that's reawakening. Historically, the ancient horror was something like a ghost story reserved for places close to the equator. But as the planet warms, the territory of Naegleria fowleri is expanding. Look at the Great Roman Bath in England. For nearly 2,000 years, people bathed in those geothermal waters. But in 1978, a young girl died after swimming there. The cause? Naegleria fowleri. The baths have been closed to swimmers ever since. They are a monument to a predator that is expanding its territory. We are seeing this happen more frequently. Cases are appearing in states like Minnesota and Maryland, places where the water should be far too cold for a thermophilic amoeba to thrive. But this ancient horror is an opportunist. It only needs a few consecutive days of record-breaking heat to turn a peaceful northern lake into its own biological nursery. Warming temperatures don't just help the amoeba grow faster, they change the physics of the water. Warmer water holds less oxygen and stays stagnant longer, creating the exact biofilm environment where these hunters thrive. We aren't just finding more amoeba, we are finding them in our backyards as the temperature rises. The ancient horror doesn't need to migrate, it's just waiting for the thermostat to be turned up. In our hypothetical infection, the odds are you didn't make it. Out of 167 known cases in the United States, only 4 people have survived. Normally, by the time the doctors know what's happening, it's too late. If you do plan on going swimming in a pond or a lake, there are some things you can do to help avoid this fate. Remember that $2 piece of plastic I mentioned at the start? This is it, a simple nose clip. It's not high-tech, and it's definitely not a medical miracle. But by physically blocking the highway to your brain, you're essentially closing the door on an organism that doesn't have the tools to pick the lock. Beyond the plastic, survival comes down to understanding the ecology of the predator. Remember our hunt at the pond? The hunters live in the biofilm in the sediment. When you're in shallow, warm water, try to avoid stirring up the bottom. If the silt stays down, the amoeba stay with it. Finally, let's talk about neti pot safety. Never, ever use untreated tap water for sinus rinses. Use distilled, sterile, or previously boiled water. In a lake, the breach is an accident. In your bathroom, using tap water in a neti pot is essentially providing the bridge yourself. Nature isn't cruel, it's just indifferent. The ancient horror has been here since long before we arrived, and it will likely be here long after we're gone. My goal isn't to make you afraid of the water. It's to make sure you understand the rules of the world you're swimming in. Stay safe, stay curious, and respect the unseen. If I've earned your subscription, please leave a comment down below on what natural horror you would like to explore next.